Welcome everybody to the Business Podcast, where we pour out weekly business lessons from entrepreneurs and business owners from around the world. I'm your host, Super Joe Pardo, and my guest today is making his dreams come true by looking at goals as a puzzle and then solving those puzzles. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are right now, I need you to give a big, warm welcome to our guest, Frank Cottle. Woo!
Thank you, Joe. It's great to be here.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time today to come on the Business Podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Why don't you get started by giving some background about yourself, Frank?
Well, let's see. I'm out here in Newport Beach, California. Been here all my life. It's just too lazy to leave, I suppose. No, we have six now generations of family here in Newport Beach. We're an old ranching and farming family here in California. I started my career, I'll call it in 1970. Let's do this by decades. After getting kicked out of the first of two colleges that I attended, I decided I would spend some time sailing. And so I raced sailing yachts and worked as a commercial diver for a while as I was going through college. And I raced big sailing yachts around the world, enjoyed that for a bit, met a lot of very interesting people. Also, one of about five guys that we started a very large, or very successful, I should say, it wasn't large when it started, yacht brokerage. We ended up being the largest yacht brokerage in the world when I sold out in about 1980. Between 80 and 90, I decided to enter the commercial real estate business. And we built buildings trying to do a land banking project. We decided we wanted to build the smallest buildings we could find, least amount of bricks and mortar on the biggest piece of dirt possible. Something that would tie up that land for about 10 years in the path of progress. And we discovered these funny little things called executive suites. And that was about the most revenue per square foot we could generate on a commercial building. And so we started building dedicated projects that we would put executive suites, now called business centers and coworking centers, into those projects and get an enhanced yield and then sell them. So for 10 years, we built a new project every 110 days. A new building broke out of the ground, so a fairly good pace, and ended up with 42 projects across the southwestern United States, and sold that portfolio in 1990. Liked that business a lot. It was very good to us, and so we built 195 more projects over the next 10 years, and sold that portfolio right at the height of the .com era in 2000. Discovered I didn't like the business model that much. I loved the business, but I didn't like the business model. I wanted to change from a property company to an operating company, and now to a technology services company, a software as a service type company, which didn't exist back then. In year 2000, 2001, there were just a few companies like that. And so we laid about building what we have today, which is the Alliance Business Centers group of companies. We have 15 companies operating at 700 locations in 52 countries. And it runs on a model very similar to Best Western Hotels, but we added a funny twist to it called Alliance Virtual Offices. And that really is very much like Expedia. We're a wholesaler of officing around the world throughout our industry. We also operate the industry's largest news and information network, the industry's largest charitable foundation, the industry's platform for meetings and conventions, and a variety of other things. So we decided part of our business model was not just to build a good company, but also to be industry activists. We felt that by growing our industry, we could help our own company and others succeed. So that's what we've done.
Wow. So let me see if I get this straight. So your current model is basically co-working space?
We don't actually own the spaces. That's the difference. We decided we preferred to own the customer. than the space. And I'll look at Expedia, what Expedia and Hotels.com and companies like that have done. They basically said, we want to own and service the customer, but we don't necessarily want to own the hotels. We do the same thing in commercial real estate around the serviced office industry. And I'll describe our industry, define it, I guess. Our industry is comprised of all providers that combine people, place, and technology into a single bundled product and deliver it with a highly flexible service agreement. We gain greater efficiencies by combining those things together, as you can imagine, and the service agreement adds flexibility. So if you look at companies and what all companies need, as we're talking about entrepreneurs here, all companies need as many clients as they can get, of course. They need access to capital for growth. They need flexibility. Because if you can tell me what's going to happen tomorrow and how you're going to adjust to it, if you've got fixed leases, fixed overhead, fixed employees, fixed debt, then, boy, you're a better business person than I'll ever be. So flexibility is key to what we provide. And within our industry, we have different sectors, just like the automotive industry, you could say. In the automotive industry, everybody knows what a car is, or the automotive industry is. They take a motor, a chassis, and a wheel, and they move people around. We take people, place, and technology and add flexibility to it. So we create an officing product instead of a transportation product. Just like in the automotive industry, you have different sectors. You have luxury cars and SUVs and sports cars. Well, we have business centers, co-working centers, incubators, accelerators, logistics centers, culinary centers, media centers, et cetera. And each of those sectors, just like in the automotive industry, you buy a sports car, you expect fun. You get a luxury car, you've made it. There's a brand promise that comes with those sectors, and in our industry, it's the same. A business center provides people, place, technology, and professional image and services. A co-working center takes those same three elements, adds community, and provides business growth through an active community structure. An incubator adds mentoring to either one of those two. An accelerator adds access to capital to an incubator, et cetera, et cetera. So each sector has its own promise and really its own name and definition. But it's all part of the same industry.
Oh, wow. So, I guess that makes sense. To not have to put up with the struggles of doing buildings, but I mean the pace in which you were doing buildings before. That's how many employees did you have before when you were doing like 100? You said 100 some buildings a year.
No, we were doing a building every 110 days.
110 days, sorry.
And we used contractors for labor, and so we were really more of a property development and management company. So our employee base wasn't terribly large. Honestly, I don't remember how many employees we had, but it was probably only about 15 to 20 core employees, because you're using contractors, architects, engineers. Basically, the skill sets of a development company are finance, modeling, the ability to organize and do project management. And we had a very cookie cutter structure because we knew exactly the kind of building we wanted. We knew the exact locale, just like a franchise company does almost. We knew the locale, all the requirements for a successful project. And fortunately, most of them were successful. If you do anything long enough, you either get good at it or, something else happens. And, we were lucky, I suppose.
So with your current business, Alliant Virtual Offices, what was some of the first steps you took to get started when you were like, we're gonna start this up and we're not going to own the buildings this time?
Well, if you look at the concept of owning the customer instead of the center, the first thing you need is inventory. You need centers. So the very first thing we built was the Alliance Business Centers Network. which, as I said, works a little bit like Best Western Hotels. We have owner-operator member centers that join our network, and they pay us a fee to join the network, and then we provide a variety of services to them. But that gave us inventory. So now we had a global inventory of facilities. We have about, 15, 16 million square feet of commercial office space for access right now in, like I say, 700 locations in 52 countries. So that gives us a platform. Thereafter, we had to build the technology and the business model and convince the industry to use the business model, to allow us to use the business model of wholesaling. So just like a reservations agent in the travel industry has a wholesale discount on a room at a hotel or a seat at an airplane, we have a prearranged discount model with the inventory that we place our clients into. And then we become the client. We become financially responsible in the center or in the property for the payments, and we collect all the money and manage the entire process.
So could you go into a little bit about how you went about building out that network? Was it because of pre-existing, I mean, because that many countries, that many, rental spaces, like that seems like you either have to know a lot of people or know like 2 or 3 people who already own all that space.
Well, we were fortunate. We'd been in the industry for a while, and I'm a really friendly guy. So we had a lot of people we knew all over the world. And one of the things that we did, and as I mentioned earlier, we're very involved in the industry's meetings and conventions platform, is we hosted a lot of meetings around the world on behalf of the industry and on behalf of our growing network group. So that allowed us to make friends, connections, and establish business relationships globally. That was part of, I won't call it a strategy. It was part of the service we felt we needed to provide. Was an educational component to the industry. You have to remember, we'd already been in the industry 20 years or so when we started this. So we'd had a bit of experience. We'd already been the largest private operator of serviced offices and business centers in the world, and already bought and sold a number of companies, and so we kind of had a good basis to start. So I think if you look at what we did, wasn't particularly amazing as a journey. We started as a property company because it's pretty concrete. You can figure that out pretty easily. All it takes is capital, really, and then not making too many mistakes. And if you make mistakes, being able to outlast the market where you made them. So, you sit on a piece of dirt long enough, it's going to be more valuable. Look at Manhattan, so that you can make some mistakes there. And so that was a natural thing. Then we looked at that business model and said, well, that's good, but it's pretty expensive to build buildings and pretty tiring. And you get tired of dealing with cities and all the development issues you have to deal with. So we accelerated it and went into a business services model. Well, then you look back in time and say, what started happening in the late 90s? Well, you had that .com thing boosting up. And so we sold the business services model in 2000. Good time to sell stuff, as you might remember. And said, well, what's the next generation of business going to look like? And we said, well, it's going to be technology. So we changed our model and the valuation of the company from a business services model, which is based on a multiple of EBITDA in a private structure and a multiple of earnings in a public structure, over to a software, which is based on a multiple of revenue. So it gave us a new business model to meet the next generation of what we felt was important. And it also allowed us to embrace the entire spectrum of products in the industry. We didn't have to guess necessarily which location was going to be best anymore, or which model was going to be the flavor of the month, or when was the right moment to buy land or the right moment to take a lease. We just had to build the platform and the technology, and then do the marketing to attract the customers to the value of the industry at large. And having done so, we removed a tremendous amount of risk and created a substantially greater value for the effort that we were putting forth than we had in our previous business model. So it was very much an evolutionary. We got smarter, not dumber.
Now, you said before that you come from a line of entrepreneurs and people living out in the California, specifically Southern California.
No, both Northern and Southern California, or Central and Southern California. In California, we've got Southern, Central, and Northern, and Central sort of is from about the Napa Valley wine country on down, and Southern is sort of from Santa Barbara on down to Mexico. So we were pretty much involved in those areas, and have been out in California really since before statehood. So when I say we're an old ranching and farming company, call my grandmother, Juanita. We were an old California ranching company.
So, but were you the first in the building industry for your family? That you know of. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking. My dad had invested in real estate, but not a lot. Most of the investment in real estate was related to the core companies, which are in the food production and distribution business. So warehousing, cold storage, things of that nature. But I was the first one that started developing commercial office space.
So how did your family take it when you were like, I'm going to do this thing that like isn't ranching and isn't dabbling in real estate?
Oh, the most of the ranching and stuff had been gone for a while. We still had some farms and some things when I was growing up, and a few things, but we were mostly in the food distribution and production business. And it was funny, I was doing the yachting thing for the first 10 years. We built quite a successful company. And when I sold out and explained to my dad what I was going to do, he said, "Well, Frank, it's good you finally put your long pants on." I'm looking and said, "Geez, we just built the biggest company in the yachting industry." Well, what do you mean? He says, "Well, now you're doing something serious." I went, "Okay." Great.
It's
man.
not as tangible, especially for
most fabulous mentor and person you'd ever want to know.
No, I could I could definitely envision that conversation. But it's also a different generation too, right? And coming from the food industry and something that's a little more tangible than like these yacht things that like.
Oh yeah, we
aren't necessarily a tangible thing.
No, we had a wonderful client base in my dad's company. We had large school systems, state hospital systems, federal government in forms of the armed forces, and different large, what are referred to as institutional in-feeders, a lot of restaurant supplies, ship chandlery, that sort of thing. So it was very tangible business. And like my dad used to say, there's one thing people got to do, and they got to eat. So no matter whether good or bad, but they're going to eat. In fact, he was quite a speculator at times. You know the commodity markets, and if you look at the farming commodities, you've probably heard soybeans and pork bellies and fryers and all that sort of thing. And my dad had an interesting reputation. He'd say, "Well, I'll buy 500,000 pounds of pork bellies." And he'd buy that on the commodities exchange in Chicago, and then the market would turn against him a little bit. And he'd just always say, "Ship it." And all of a sudden, 3-4 railroad cars full of pork bellies would show up on a siding and next to a cold storage plant, and we just sit on them until the market turned again. So he was a speculator with a good hedge. You could have called him the original hedge fund guy. So ship it. Those were famous words around our house.
Frank, what's your hobby outside of business?
surfing, sailing, cycling, um, activist sports. I'm not a golfer. I don't have the patience for wandering around in plaid pants, I guess. Um, so I like things where there's an immediate payback, and sometimes if you make a mistake, you feel it. I'm not afraid of a little pain. So I still am very actively involved in a variety of water sports, and my wife and I travel quite a bit, and we like to always do cycling when we're traveling. Instead of rent a car, we'll take some bikes and say, well, we can see that country. We'll take some bikes, and so we take that approach.
Wow, that sounds awesome. With the weather though, is it cold there? Because I see you're wearing a jacket. You're wearing a
Well,
jacket.
I'm wearing a jacket because I left all the windows open. I live on an island. I left all the windows open on the ocean side of the house today, and it got breezy this afternoon. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to sit here for about a while, and I'm going to put a little coat on, a little pullover on. But I am wearing. I won't stand up and do through that, but I am wearing shorts and flip flops too. That's a typical beach wear here. You wear a sweatshirt, shorts, and flip flops. Looks totally stupid, but it's very comfortable.
I don't think it's stupid at all. I wear a sweatshirt with shorts all the time because my body will get cold before my legs get cold.
Yeah.
My legs are the ones that got all the hair, So I just real quick want to remind everyone that they're listening to The Business Podcast. I'm your host, Super Joe Pardo, and I'm talking with Frank Cottle. Frank, what's been the biggest roadblock for you?
Well, I don't think any of us accomplish as much as our imagination perceives we might, or that we could, because the brain's a funny thing. It moves in 50 directions at once, and the human being, I can't. But I don't know that I've had any real roadblocks. Possibly partnerships that you choose that don't work out quite the way you would hope they would, but they don't stop you. They're not a roadblock. They're a bump in the road, I think. Maybe I've just been lucky, but you work hard, you have a solid idea, you put together a good team, you capitalize it properly. Nothing should stop you, save a catastrophic event like being in the wrong place at the wrong time and when a nuclear bomb goes off. It's just a matter of application to what you want to do and consistency, I think. And part of that is the absolute need to always build a good team. And a lot of people say, well, I build a good team around you. No, you really want to become part of a good team and have the whole team be peers. We're all leaders in our company. And matter of fact, we have a little conversation with everybody that joins our company. Right when they're joining the company or when they're interviewing, actually. And we explain to people the one thing that will get you fired quickly, that you will lose your job, is if you do not make decisions. So we empower everybody to make decisions for their own position and even all around them. If heaven forbid somebody's not around that's above them or below them, so they have to make those decisions. They just can't go running to somebody and say, what should I do here? What should I do there? Don't make the decision. If you screw up, we'll fix it. The one thing that slows all companies down is not being loaded with decision makers. And so that's something that we learned early on in the construction and early in the yachting industry. You're racing a sailboat from here to there. Somebody comes back and say, well, should I tighten this or should I adjust that or should I head up or head down? Well, you've lost a race right there. Everybody has to make decisions. And hopefully it doesn't kill anybody when they make the wrong one.
No, I think that's really powerful that, I'm all about empowering your team and empowering yourself. They always say, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room, right? So
right, absolutely.
I think it's really important that, not everyone's going to be the smartest at every single thing, but like to get the right players at the right positions,
Sure.
that are expert at that what they need to be expert at, is super important. And I think it's really interesting that you're, that you identified that the decision making process is what slows things down, because I think that it is really frustrating that the bigger the organization, the slower it moves. And I think that a lot of that comes back to, like, not empowering your team to make those decisions, and to empowering them to it's okay to make a mistake. And the part of that, and I always go back to, like, with my clients, like, look, if you're not factoring in your mistakes as part of what your cost is to doing business, then you're not really factoring in your cost of doing business, right? Like, those are things that you need to be able to account for when mistakes happen, or even costs rise, the things that are beyond your control.
Well, there's an old country western song, and I forget the fellow's name exactly now, but it says you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. and I think the issue there is, you're going to make mistakes. You have to recognize you've made a mistake. The biggest challenge with mistakes, being on the wrong path, is staying on too long. Okay, you don't know when to fold them, so to speak. If you make a mistake, go, darn, I made a mistake. Boom, I'm out. I'm done. I've made that mistake now, and then deal yourself a new hand immediately. Let the good things run long and make the bad things cut short. And if you can even if you make 60% of your decisions are wrong decisions, but they only last 10 or 20% of their life, then the other 40% that you've made that run for decades that are right, that's what creates a success. It's that cutting the bad ones short and letting the good ones run long.
I've seen it, and I've seen it with trusting people for too long that don't have your best intentions, whether it's intentional or unintentional, or just a bad decision on your part for the picking the wrong person at the time, and just it's like, you don't back down. You don't back down. You just keep on keeping on, regardless of how things are going.
Yeah,
the place is on fire.
Sure, that's that old insanity definition. Doing the same thing and over and expecting a different outcome.
The house is on fire, but the bed's comfortable. So I'm just I'm just going to stick with it.
Exactly.
Frank, what was your childhood dream growing up?
I think to kind of follow in the footsteps of my dad and my grandfather a little bit, of being a serial entrepreneur, being totally independent. And I know when my wife and I got married, we were married young. We got married in college, and she was 20 and I was 21. And I told her right then, big bravado of a young guy, and her thing is, well, I'm going to live exactly the way I want. We're either going to be millionaires by the time we're 30, or we're going to be bums on the beach. And being the sweet, wonderful woman that she was and still is today, she just said, okay. So unfortunately, we ended up being millionaires and living on the beach as well. Of course, that's kind of easy when you come from the beach. But the point was, I was going to do what I wanted. I was going to follow my ambitions and my dreams. And she was great, wonderfully supportive in every way possible for that, and a huge, huge contributor to all of what we've done. But I wasn't going to sacrifice the fun factor. And I think that's why I went sailing and worked around the ocean, which is one of my key things that I love. When I was young, I wasn't ready to settle down, and I've always believed college just taught you to work for somebody else, which is why I suppose I got kicked out of the first college I attended. Actually, I was asked not to return, and there's a big difference. But I believe that, if you could learn how to make decisions in college, then no matter what your degree and what your specialization, you will have come out with a good education. Learn how to make those decisions. And that's why we tell people today, if you can't make decisions, you really can't work with our company. You have to have that takes courage a lot of times. But I was able to blow off a lot of steam and kind of live a fantasy life for a number of years as I started. And what I saw doing that when I was younger, I saw a lot of mistakes that people made and a lot of things where they worked and they sacrificed and they slaved for the first 40 years of their career, building a company or building something that was highly successful, very, very successful. But by the time they got there, they were on their third trophy wife, and their kids hated them, and everybody's waiting for them to die, and they didn't have their health, and they were just buying a big yacht to take one trip around the world. And that was it. They were done. Well, that's dumb. So I'm just going to enjoy every day. I did then, I do now. And, that you just have to enjoy every day.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think being able to like listen and take in and learn from other people's stories. I mean, that's one of the reasons I started this show in the first place, was to be able to listen and take in more. One of my downfalls is I don't read books. But I do write them. But I have so many conversations with people that I pull the books that they have within them out to enjoy for myself. So
well, I'm not a big reader of books myself. I mean, I read a lot of history and I read a lot of autobiographies and things of that nature. I'm fascinated by history, but I don't. People say, "What's your favorite business book?" And I usually hem and haw and say I don't have one. Well, who's your favorite entrepreneur? And I kind of think, well, maybe Thomas Edison. And they go, what? And I said, well, I really look towards people that invented things that weren't necessarily standing on the shoulders of others, but were truly inventive. I don't look at iterative thought as much of an invention or anything that we've done. Is we haven't invented anything. We've stood on the shoulders of others, made improvements as we moved along. But when people say, well, what do you read? I say, well, I read every piece of news I can get my hand on all day long. I think that if you don't know what's going on in the world, you aren't aware of all the activities in your industry. If you're not the best student of your industry, then you won't be as successful. And so I try to constantly be a good student. And I find most business books are put together by consultants, and they just want to, they're consultants. What can I say? And it's usually 3 years old by the time it gets published, so it's not new information. So I'm just not. I don't fall into that category.
No, I totally hear you on that. It's. Yeah, I mean, most of what it's most of the things I do read is news at this point, and then documentaries. I love documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I'm working out, I'm watching a documentary while I'm working out because I want to learn about things that I wouldn't have any access to otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's
I'm very much the same way.
Visual learner. I like listening, but I, mostly like watching and being like visually engaged. So, and then talking to people, like that's it for me. The big things. I mean, the new, reading the news too, but, so I totally get it. And, I always feel guilty because I always feel like, man, I could be doing, like, I always feel guilty when people are like, what do you mean? You write books, yet you don't read books. And I'm like, I don't want to take in too much outside influence and influencing my work, because my work that I do, I feel is quite different when I show it to other people and they're like, I've never seen anything like this. And I'm like, well, that's good. It's supposed to be that way. I'm not taking, what somebody else did and doing it again. So,
sure.
But unlike unlike with the people you were talking about, consultants, I self-publish, so I don't have to worry about 2, 3, 4 years of like waiting for my book to come out.
That's one of the benefits of the world we live in today. You can self-publish and self-produce, and so that it's I think that's great for all of us. We're not just seeing the potentially commercially successful ideas that an editor or some publishing house feels they might make money on. You're seeing a lot more original thought, and original thought is truly to be treasured.
And you can pivot it so much quicker. You can make changes so much quicker than like, oh, new version, and it's going to have to take 6 months just to go through an editing process, and then you have to fall into like, where's the release date of that, and things like that nature. So I think the flow of information, the flow of the internet has changed that so much.
No, that's why we run a news and information network. I mean, it's the same thing. We're running the news for our industry, or managing a big portion of it, and getting it published and getting it out there. And it's that daily information that really helps people. As long as it's not just noise, it has to be real quality. Otherwise, it's just, some blogging fluff for search purposes, and that gets awful tiresome.
So the first chapter of my first book is called No Fluff, because the few books that I have read, I've always thought to myself, and maybe you feel the same way, like, man, there's a lot of useless stories in these books that they're just trying to like use to make a point, like that, when instead of just delivering the point, it's like they gotta fluff it up and give these stories that, maybe they'll resonate with some people, but like I look at it and I'm like, well, that's a pretty silly story to put in to make the point that like, don't forget where you're at, or don't forget your place. And it was like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get religious, but if you look at most books that have lasted for 1,000 years or multiple thousands of years in many cases, they have things like, here's 10 rules to live by. That's pretty much it. And then there's the stories about different things, and that's it. But when it comes down to it, what do you remember? Oh, those 10 rules. So just publish the damn 10 rules. That's my deal.
No, I hear
I want it in a memo. I want it in a memo.
No, I hear you. I mean, that's why when I told people what my first book was going to be, I was like, it's 31 life-changing concepts. It's probably about 100 pages long, like size 14, double spaced, with lots of pictures.
Well, I was like, with 31 concepts, you've now outdone Buddha.
I mean, it's just things like that. Like I was like, just get to the point and be really, really intentional about every single word that's in there. Because otherwise, to me, it's just like I wouldn't want to write a book that I wouldn't want to read.
Well, but did you ever consider that life never changes? It's only people that change. So you really can't have a life-changing concept. You can only have people-changing concepts.
That's a fair point. I mean, well, what would be like? Wouldn't at that point it would be the noun version of life, or is life always a noun? I don't know. I'm not an editor. I'm a writer. But okay. No. But the point being, like, or the possessive word.
There
of
you go.
Like your life, my life type thing. Not like life as a macrocosm or something like that. Anyway, with all that said, Frank, what's your dreams for the future look like?
Oh, I think to do more good in the world. We started last year a charitable foundation. We looked across our industry, which is the basis for most of our thinking, and as a company, and we looked across the industry and we thought, well, all in the commercial office industry, and in our industry in particular, which is very short term, people, place, and technology, all three of those things. We looked across our industry and we said, well, in a good year, we're 93% physically occupied, and in a bad year, we're 88% physically occupied. So we always have a vacancy factor. And so we thought, well, we should calculate how we can put the vacancy in commercial office space and in our own industry to good use. So we created a charitable organization, a charitable foundation, and now I don't know how many companies we host, but we have a few hundred locations that we've set up across the United States to host and house other charitable organizations by donating our vacant office space throughout our industry. So we've learned to take a wasting asset, vacancy. If you didn't sell it that day, it's gone. And turn that into support a variety of other charitable organizations that need help. And so we're going to be doing quite a bit more work in that vein. We think that it shouldn't just be something as small as us and our industry, but it should. Although we, in our first year of operation, we have probably done about $5.5–6 million in donations in our first year. So it's not a small charity. Heck, I'm bigger than Trump. But it's a real thing, and we've been talking with a lot of very large property companies, a lot of large corporations, and even government, saying, when we look at your office space, we look at your all the desks that are empty because you planned on expanding but didn't, or because the market turned against you, and now you've got a 10-year lease and it's half empty, and there's all this extra wasting space, and we look at all the repurposing for charitable reasons that could go into that. So I think a lot of my own ambitions will go that direction through the next few decades.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's incredible amount of charity donation that you have going on there.
Well, we're very, very happy, but we really think we've just scratched the surface. We think this can be quite a large movement, if you will, and it's very environmental in many respects because you're taking waste and repurposing and putting it to use. It's a sort of our own recycling program, if you will. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if every airline that had an empty seat gave it away to somebody in need, if every hotel that had an empty room contributed to housing on a temporary basis, every restaurant that's food was past due date, or maybe they'd overcooked the fish or something, who knows what. And a lot of restaurants, it's very common within the restaurant industry, they're engaged in a feeding of the hungry program. But this can be expanded quite materially. That's part of what we're working on right now.
That is awesome. Frank, how can people connect with you online?
I think the easiest way is reach out through alliancevirtualoffices.com, alliancevirtualoffices, plural.com. Or if they just want to know about our industry, go to allwork.space, allwork.space. So, all workspace.
No, it's awesome. I will have those in the show notes at superjoepardo.com for everyone to go and check out. And yeah, does the website enable you to get in contact with you if you want to like have your own, like have your space up for rent?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We work with all variety of office operating companies. And we have a consulting group that develops centers and buys and sells businesses within our industry, and develops licensing programs for investment groups, and consults with quite a number of large institutional investors from the very largest private equity firms that you would certainly be aware of on down. So we're very, very active in all aspects of our industry.
Awesome. So I really appreciate you having you on the show today, and I'd love to have you on the show again. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share? No, just, tomorrow's going to be warm and sunny in Southern California. We're just going to keep doing what we do, and we wish everybody a good evening. Is it the fire's been affected you at all? No, we've been very fortunate. The fire has been very devastating to a lot of people, and it's sort of, South Florida has hurricanes, and California has fires, and Oklahoma has tornadoes, and there's always something that you have to be cautious of and work around. And for California, it's wildfires. I live surrounded by water, so I'm kind of lucky in that regard.
I have to worry about tsunamis and things like that, but not fires.
Yeah, the tsunamis aren't that often, are they, on the California coast?
No, and in Southern California, the way our coast works, or the way the coast works along the western U.S., we're not exposed to the tsunamis as they are in the northern part of California, or the Oregon, Alaskan coast that kind of jet out and catch different swells in different directions. So it's more of a local joke than anything else. We had a tsunami last year, and we all went down to the beach to watch it. Just like they tell you shouldn't do, but we couldn't really see it. We thought we saw it, but we weren't sure.
Well, thank you again, Frank. I really do appreciate you taking the time tonight to be on The Business Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this episode of The Business Podcast, just all I can do is just ask that you share with someone who will get something out of it as well. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to my guests, and it'll mean a lot to the person that you choose to share it with. Frank, thank you so much again. I really do appreciate your time.
My pleasure, and anything we can ever do to help, always call.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Business Podcast featuring Super Joe Pardo. Get more business content at superjoepardo.com. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on The Business Podcast, send an email to joe@superjoepardo.com. The Business Podcast is copyrighted to 234 Solutions, LLC.